All right, this is part 2 of 3 of my my review of board games that I've played in 2021. In the first video, I took the games that I played, about 40 games or so that I played primarily in digital form, either on app or on Board Game Arena, and ranked them into the tier list. And Yokohama was my, I guess, favorite game in 2021 that I played primarily digitally. And then we had some games that I wasn't quite as crazy about. So if you want to check out that video, take a look. In this video, I'm going to focus on games that I played primarily in person. So I'll go ahead and hide the games that I've played primarily digitally. Down at the bottom there are the lists that I've played primarily in person. And when I started my last video, I wanted it to be a relatively short video, and it was a half-hour long. So clearly it's not going to be a short video, but I've played even more games in person than I did digitally, and so I've decided to split this up into 2 parts. These are basically alphabetically ranked, and I'm going to take the first half of them or so and create a tier list here. So I'll hide the ones that I'm not going to do today. I'll come back and do those in the third and final video of the series. And I may do a short, really legitimately short video at the end that summarizes the entire tier list and just quickly reviews what games I put in the A category, and the S category, the S tier, and all the other tiers. Okay, so let's get this one started. Air, Land, and Sea. Kind of tough one to start with, actually. This is a short little card game in which you have a set of cards, and you are trying to kind of outthink your opponent. There are 3 areas: air area, land area, and sea area, where you're trying to win a majority to have the most power in each of those areas. If you win 2 out of the 3, you win the round. And it was fun. I did well in the game. I'm not super fond of those kind of dueling, outguessing kind of games. I'm much more of a fan of a game where you're doing your strategy, I'm doing my strategy, and we see who has the most points at the end. That's my favorite type of game. Ones where the game is primarily about outthinking your opponent, like guessing what they're going to do, and I don't like guessing games in general. So it's not a bad game, though. It's quick playing. The rules are relatively uncomplicated. But just based on my preferences, I'm going to put this down on D tier. I think it will be high on the D tier list because I wouldn't mind playing it. There's probably some things on a D tier that I just wouldn't want to play. This is a game I wouldn't mind playing because it's 10 minutes long and very simple game. Architects of the West Kingdom is a worker placement game. When I first heard about it, I got so excited because most worker placement games, you start with a couple of workers, and one of the actions you can take is to get more workers. But this was a game where you start with 20 workers, and at some point, amazingly, you do run out of them at some point and have to figure out ways to recoup them. That turns out to be a harder thing than I ever thought. So used to games where you get 3 workers and that's what you have to deal with. Architects works best, I think, with a large group. I would like to play it more in a large group. It's not quite as much fun for me as the other, spoiler alert, other West Kingdom games, and also probably not quite as fun for me as Raiders of the North Sea, which is by the same company. But I like it quite a bit, and I'm very excited about the upcoming Works of Wonder expansion. I think that might really take this up for me. So right now, it's a solid B tier kind of game, and I like it a lot. Terraforming Mars, Aries Expedition. So these are alphabetical, and so I put this with the A's, Aries Expedition. I've only played it once. Definitely want to play it more. It combines elements from one of my very favorite games, Terraforming Mars, and one of my least favorite games, Race for the Galaxy. And so the question is, where does this one play out? And it's much more like Terraforming Mars for me than it is like Race for the Galaxy. It doesn't have the thing I dislike about Race for the Galaxy, where I feel like you're really just kind of running the same engine over and over and over again, taking the same actions over and over and over again. I think a friend of mine would disagree that if it actually felt like Aries Expedition was too much, I have to keep taking this action over and over again. But I didn't find that, and I think the game will be different every time you play it, depending on your starting corporation. I am a little worried about whether some corporations are a little overpowered, but I definitely have to play it more to make that decision. I'll put it on the B tier behind Architects. Artemis Project. This is another game like Architects of the West Kingdom that really benefits from a big group. I've played this game and felt very underwhelmed by it. It's a dice placement game and has this really interesting tension between players. High numbers are useful because you get more stuff with them, but low numbers are useful because that lets you go first, and sometimes things run out. If you placed a higher number, you're not going to get anything. Really clever mechanism for how to use dice. Like I said, I've had some underwhelming plays of it. But then I've also had some plays in big groups where every single turn felt fun. I think there's some clunky aspects to it. I think the components are a mixed bag, but some of them are really good. I like the art. I like the theme. And I would say I would place this on B tier just behind Architects of the West Kingdom. And with I've never had a terrible time with it. I wish the solo mode was better. But when you get a big group, every single turn can be wonderful tension. So I think it's a very strong game. Azul. Azul is a tile placement game. You're making trying to get your tiles in a situation where you have them in a row or a column, and that will get you extra points. It has a neat drafting mechanism. I can't say I completely understand the strategy. I don't usually win this game. I like playing it though because it's easy to play, it's easy to teach. I'm not sure it's a favorite of mine, but I would never not play it. I think I'll put it on C tier just to have something on, not put everything on B tier, but it's really in that B to C tier kind of range for me. Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig is another tile placement game. It has the Seven Wonders type of mechanic where the stuff that you're drafting is going around the table clockwise one round, counterclockwise the next round. It has a unique mechanism. Well, it's not unique because the same mechanism, I guess, is in Between Two Cities, the predecessor game for this one, where you're building a castle with your neighbor, and you're kind of sharing the score for that. And yet, your score, since you're building one to your left and one to your right, your score is based on the weakest castle that you have. And I guess it's always fun. It's quick playing. It takes a long time to score, but it plays very quickly. And there are very few games that play quickly up to 7 or with the expansion 8 players, so it achieves that. I can't say it's quite on A tier, but I would definitely put it on B tier. I guess I would put it right behind Architects of the West Kingdom. Call to Adventure is a game where you're sort of building a character, you're telling a story based on the things that you're adding to the character over time. It has this unusual system where instead of rolling dice, you're casting runes, and they either land on one side or the other, and you tabulate things, and that gives you certain power to meet certain challenges or take certain cards. I didn't love it. I thought it was a little fiddly for what you get out of it. I think kind of rules heavy for not a lot of payoff for me, and the telling of the story isn't something that I really care much about. It's not a bad game at all, and with the right, my kids really liked it quite a bit. But I would say it probably belongs on D tier. But again, another strong entry on D tier. I haven't hated any of my D tier games yet. Castles of Burgundy is a Stefan Feld game. It is my second favorite, I guess, Stefan Feld game. It's a point salad game. It's a dice placement game. I love that there's only 4 actions that you can take with your dice. So there's in some respects, there's a constrained set of things that you can do. And the dice create additional constraints. But then you've got a bunch of tiles to choose from, pulling tiles, a bunch of places you can place it, placing tiles. You're trying to fill areas on your board with those tiles, trying to do so quickly, and trying to fill large areas, and trying to beat your opponents to filling certain types of areas. It's just got a bunch of little additions to the rules that just make it So it's just it's fun, and it's one of those games where while you are racing your opponents for certain things, you're basically working on your own zone, and you're racing to get tiles before your opponents take them. But then once you've got the tile, you're sort of putting together your own strategy. It's an S tier game for me. Love Castles of Burgundy. Castles of Mad King Ludwig is a game where you are drafting rooms for your castle, and there are different types of rooms that have different consequences for how you place them. Basically, every room though scores you points, and then will give you additional points if certain other rooms end up next to it, or maybe take away points. And then when you get a collection of, or when you seal off a room, when all of the exits to that room are met by some other entrance to some other room, then that, depending on the type of room, you'll get a bonus. It also has a very cool bidding mechanism where one person lays out the tiles and prices them, and then when you buy a tile, you pay the person who laid them out in that order. And then, of course, who gets to place them out shifts around the table. So your income is basically coming from other people paying you for tiles that were drawn from the deck that you just arranged in a certain order. And so there's a strategy do I price this one high so that if somebody really wants it, I get paid a lot? Or maybe I even price it so high no one else can afford it, but I can afford it, so I can make sure to get it at the end. Or should I try to place the tile I want low so that I can get it for cheap, but I have to wait till everybody else picks a tile before I get a choice, and I might lose that tile. All that kind of decision making is fun. I guess I would call this an A tier game. I wish I get to play it more. Century Spice Road, this is Century Spice A New World, the third in the Century series. It's the worker placement version. Some plays of this I've really loved. Other plays of this have been really boring. I think the love part happens more often than the boring part. I like all the aspects of this game. It's a pretty basic engine builder, pretty basic worker placement game, but you're collecting cards that have symbols on them, and those symbols may score you points depending on the endgame scoring tiles that you pick up during the game. I really like this game in combination. The Century games let you play them in combination with other Century games that each combination has different rules. I think that's where this game really shines. But I think I'll put this on B tier. B tier's getting crowded. I think I'll put it right there. I do like Architects a lot too. This is Century Spice Road, the original, and it's a pretty basic game. It's got a Concordia mechanism of playing out a hand of cards, where you play the cards and then you take an action to pull all your cards back into your hand. So you have free choice of what card you're going to play. But then once you've played it, you got to take a rest action to pull them back into your hand to be able to play them again. And all the cards do is either give you a resource, one of 4 types of spices, they're cubes of different colors, or upgrading one type to another type. That's basically it. They're either conversions or you take them. And then you're trying to fill contracts. So it's very Splendor-like, it's Lords of Waterdeep-like, Trekking the World-like. You're turning something to fill a contract, taking that card, and getting points for the card. It's very streamlined, though. I love it a lot. I love the brain burn of trying to figure out a series of, based on these cards in my hands, these conversions will let me get this card, but am I really going to get it before somebody else at the table gets that one? Maybe I should go for a less lucrative card because people don't seem to gun for it. And you really have to pay attention to the spices that are on your opponent's boards to see, are they amassing a collection of spices to try to grab the contract that I want? It's an incredibly interactive game for that reason. So I think I like it the best of the Century games. So I'm going to place it on A tier. And like I said, the combos of the games are almost like even higher for me. I did not get to play Eastern Wonders in this year, and I've only played it like once and maybe once again in combination with another Century game. I think the reputation is that that's the weakest of the 3, but I didn't find it that way. I found it equally as fun as the other 2. So I suspect if I'd played it, it would end up in either A tier or B tier, very similar to the other games. I've been playing a lot of chess lately, and I have my Lee Chess account name under my picture. Um, and chess online is one of the few games I play against strangers. I mean, I played thousands and thousands of games against random people. I do get to play, obviously, since it's on this list, I do get to play chess over the board, although I've primarily played it online, so maybe chess is on the wrong list here. Um, and I play no time limit versus I have a chess clock at home. We play 8-minute games a lot. Online, I play 1, 3, 5-minute games primarily. And blitz and bullet chess are very different than thinky chess. Chess is underappreciated by the board game community. It is a perfect game. It is definitely an S tier game. I'm going to place it ahead of Castles of Burgundy. There will be other things in front of it, but from a perfection standpoint, I really don't think there's too many better games than chess. And I'm currently, as I'm filming this, following very closely the Magnus Carlsen Jan Nepomniachtchi match for the World Championship taking place in Dubai. Clank in Space is a deck builder that marries deck building to a board that you're moving your character through. You're in a spaceship and there's an evil galactic overlord who's on the spaceship, and you're trying to steal stuff from that person and get out of the ship before you get caught. I like it. I like deck building games in general, and I like deck building plus games that have something else going on. It's a race game though, and I prefer like engine building. I guess deck building is kind of an engine. You're building your deck, so there's that. But I think it's fine. I would put it on B tier. Not my favorite game on B tier. Concordia. I've mentioned the mechanism of how you play cards in Concordia. That's a hand management game. But unlike Century, it's got this map. You're going out and putting your trading houses in cities, and that's going to enable you to produce various types of resources with one of your cards. And it's not really a set collection game, but the resources allow you to put trading houses in other cities, and also to buy cards that go into your deck, your hand rather, that allow you to take further actions. But Concordia has this amazing mechanism where the action that you the card has two points to it. One is lets you take actions, but the other is it gives you an end game scoring multiplier, and that is just so great. I just really love that about Concordia. It's an S tier game, and so far my favorite game that I've reviewed. Concordia Venus, I've got this. This is kind of a standalone expansion. I've got this separately on my list because we play the team mode. So you're playing with one other player, and you're basically playing Concordia, but you are combining your scores. And there's certain ways that you can aid your partner. You can give them money at any time. And I just thought it was worth ranking in and of itself because I think it's a great version of Concordia. I don't really see any reason to rank it differently from Concordia. Maybe I like it a little less than the base game, but maybe not. I mean, the team mode was perfectly fine and fun for me, so it's another S tier game. Crusaders is definitely an engine builder. You've got a Terra Mystica type scythe-like player board where as you take things off the player board, it exposes more powerful actions for you. It also has a Mancala type mechanism for action selection, somewhat similar to Trajan. And those two things, I like both of those things, and it's got a map that you're moving out on. I like that too. Crusaders suffers a little bit from the actions that you end up taking are not all that interesting. You're collecting things off the main board, or you're placing things on the main board. And I wish that was more exciting. I wish the things that you were doing, but the action selection system is fun, and the revealing of new powers is fun. So I like both of those things about Crusaders. I guess I would place this on B tier, maybe right behind Aries Expedition and right in front of Clank in Space. So in the last video I did, C tier was the most populous, and I predicted in that video that my rankings were going to be stronger in this one because a lot of these games are games that I own, and therefore there's a selection bias going on. And the early signs are that that prediction is going to be correct, and that B tier is going to become very full. Dinosaur Island, worker placement game in which you're building your own dinosaur park. I call it a worker placement game, but it's actually got kind of a mix of mechanisms in which you are buying cards that support what you're doing. You are kind of bidding for things to some extent. There's a phase in which everybody is sort of competing for spots. So it's really got a mix of different mechanisms. I've played it a lot solo. The solo mode is not great. So I think my thinking about the game is a little bit affected by that because the multiplayer version is good. It is tough to teach, though. A lot of components, a lot of setup, so it doesn't get to the table as much as maybe it could or should. I think it's a B tier game. I was contemplating putting it on the A tier, but I don't think I can really justify putting it on the A tier. So I'm going to put it on the B tier right behind Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. Ecos. Ecos is a game I've only played once, and I mentally checked out part of the way through because it is a bingo style game where tiles are being pulled out of a bag, and it felt very lucky. I don't think it's as lucky as I was feeling like at first. And I think there's a strategy, and how the cards work is kind of good. I was also annoyed with one component where you take an action with a card and then you flip the card. And I thought, why does this not have a track on it? Because when you flip the card, it's now upside down or sideways, and you can't really see what the card says anymore without turning your head or turning it back. And I thought it was fiddlier than it could have been. It could have just had a little, mark the number of times that you've used this card along a track, and then it would have been much more convenient. You're placing things out on the board. Those are interacting with your cards in various ways, depending on what you've placed out and how much area it's taking over, how many things are connected together in a line. So I would say I started out being interested in it, then got really down on it. And then as I started playing it more, I was like, I'm really being too hard on this game. It's not that bad. So I'm actually really looking forward to playing it again because I want to see if my initial impressions need to be updated. I'm hoping they need to be updated. And my friend who owns the game also just bought an expansion, so maybe that will make a difference too. My sense is to put it on D tier, but I think I'll put it on C tier on the idea that I think I've just been a little too hard on it, and I think there's more there than I gave it credit for. Escape Curse of the Temple is a real-time, 10-minute long game where you're rolling dice as ferociously quickly as you can in order to get the dice to come up with certain numbers that enable you to take actions on the board, explore new rooms in the temple, collect gems, like get enough symbols on your dice together that enables you to take gems, which are necessary for escaping the temple before time runs out and you perish. It's a cooperative game. There's a face on the dice that blocks the dice and doesn't let you re-roll it, and so if you get too many of those, then you could be stuck and somebody else will have to come out and help you. Although there's a symbol that you can roll on the dice to unlock your dice. Really clever, simple mechanisms. There's a ton of expansions to it. We've played some of them. It is not that deep a game, but with 6 players or a larger group, super easy to play, super fun. I think it's super fun. So, I can't quite bring myself to A tier a game that is so simple in its rule set. But on the other hand, it's fun. So I got to rank it pretty high. I'll put it right behind Artemis Project just because I've also had that feeling of Artemis Project where we've had 5 players, rolling dice. Everything is super fun. But Artemis is a little bit of a deeper game. Euphoria is another one, actually. I'm just mentioning Artemis Project. Euphoria is very similar. Euphoria is kind of a combination of Artemis Project and Century: A New World. Because in Euphoria, you're rolling dice. That's allowing you to take actions, but you're placing your dice on the board. They become like your workers. And similar to Century, if you want to use a space that somebody else is occupying, at least some of the spaces on the board, you bump them. So in Sensory: A New World, they get their workers back. In Euphoria, you get your dice back, and you get to roll it and do something else with the dice before you have to take a rest action. I think the game suffers from that rest action. You start the game with just 2 dice, so you're placing, pulling back, doing nothing, placing, pulling back, doing nothing. And that can feel a little like you're kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. I really wish games would give you something to do on that pullback rest phase. Submerge doesn't. Euphoria doesn't. Century, Spice Road doesn't. When you rest, you just pull stuff back. Century, A New World doesn't. Concordia does. When you play in Concordia and you play the card that lets you pull back all of the stuff, you get money, and you have the option to spend a couple of resources to get a new worker onto the board. I think every game should provide you something that you can do on that rest turn, just so you don't feel like, okay, now I pass. Especially when you're playing a 6-player game of Euphoria, right, where it's a long time maybe before your turn, or even a 4-player game of Century, where you're watching cards, just contracts being taken, and you can't do anything. So, but having said that about all of those games, Euphoria, I would say I had high expectations for it. My first plays were a little bit underwhelming, and I didn't really like the solo mode. And then I've had some very good plays of Euphoria with bigger groups, and I've come to really like the solo mode. So Euphoria's definitely gone up in my appreciation, and I think it's a B-tier game, again. I think I would put it right behind Architects on B tier. Fantasy Realms is a card game where it's like a rummy style game where you draw a card, play a card. So you start with 7 cards, you never get fewer cards than that. You're always picking one up, placing one down. But the cards that are placed down ethno style stay face up on the table, so you can pick any of them that have been discarded through the game. And that's also the end game trigger. When 10 cards are on the table, the game ends, and you score what's in your hand. That means anytime you pick up off the deck, you're going to add something to the tableau on the table. Anytime you pick up a face up discard and play down, you're going to keep the number of cards on the table constant. So you also have some control into how fast you push toward the end of the game. If you're satisfied with your hand, you're pushing toward the end of the game. If you're unsatisfied with your hand, you're looking for something, then you're going to try to prolong the game. And the whole game is about getting combinations of cards that work well together. Every card has rules about you score this many points, but you can add this many bonus points if you find this other card or this other suit or one of these other cards. Neat mechanism, very simple, very easy to teach, very fun to play. 1 or 2 plays through, you see every card in the deck, and you have a really good sense for what is possible. So I think it's a very good game, and the other thing is amazingly fast with 6 players. So maybe that's how I should rank it. Like if I had 6 players, and I could either play like Escape Curse of the Temple or Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig or Fantasy Realms, which one do I play? And I think the other 2 games are slightly above this in my opinion, but only slightly above this in my opinion. So I'll put that on B tier right behind Escape Curse of the Temple. It also suffers from the Between Two Castles problem of you play it very fast and it takes forever to score because everybody's got to do their hand. Gangster City is a deduction game where you're basically, somebody got killed, who's the killer, what weapon did they use? I think it's one of those kinds of games. Except, okay, you've got a card, it's facing out toward everybody else at the table. That's it. And you're making guesses about what's on your card. And people are telling you something about the card. I just remember this, you're kind of keeping track of, there could be 3 different rooms that the thing took place in, and you're making assumptions about that, and you're getting feedback from everybody at the table. I don't really like deduction games. I feel like they're just, if a game could be won by me just throwing out a random guess, and I just happen to be right, I'm not that fond of the game. And it's just a lot of mental, I feel like it's more work than fun. It's just too much. It's a memory game. It's too much to keep in your head. It is a deduction game. I mean, you're trying to avoid confirmation bias and things like that. But I would never ask to play this game. It's competently done. It's a D-tier game for me. Hanabi is another, it's funny, these 2 games are back to back. This is another game where your hand is facing out. It's a cooperative game. You're trying to play some number of suits of cards in order from 1 to 5. There's more 1s in the deck. There's only 1 5 in the deck. And on your turn, you either play a card, hoping that you're the next one up in the stack, or you are giving somebody else at the table a clue, because you can see all their cards, but you can't see your own. So you might say, okay, these 2 cards in your hand are both 1s, or these 3 cards in your hand are all blue. And it's funny, it's a deduction game like Gangster City, but it's not one that I dislike. In fact, I've had a lot of fun with Hanabi. I'm not sure what the difference is. If it's because it's cooperative or because the odds of you like randomly getting the right answer are very small, or what. But there's a lot of cleverness in like what clues do you give to people. So I think it's a good game. I think the only annoying thing about the game is it's hard to hold cards where you can't see them. You can't ever put them down because everybody at the table's got to study what you have. I played a version of Hanabi once which was tiles, Hanabi Deluxe, instead of cards. Much better, because then you just keep them in front of you domino style, and you can't see them but everybody else can, and you don't have to handle them. So that's by far the way I would prefer to play it. So I would call Hanabi, it's very much like Azul. I would call it a C-tier game, but a strong C-tier game. I'll put it just ahead of Azul. With the right group, it's a lot of fun. Istanbul. Istanbul is one of the first games I got. I think it was the first game I bought because we played it at my board game group, and I said, I must have this game. And so the first time I played it, I just loved it. And then I bought it, and I continued to love it, and then it got samey, but then I got one of the expansions, and that brought it up, but maybe not quite enough. And then I bought the other expansion, and that brought it up again, maybe not quite enough. And so it kind of went like this. I don't think it ever dropped to C tier. But I've totally had a resurgence. I took a break from this game for a while, and now I just really want to play it a lot. There's something about it. It's a big game, especially when you've got all the expansions, but it doesn't feel that, to me, tedious to set up. And it's just super fun to play. And the variety that's involved and the number of strategies that you can play. It's a game where you're trying to accomplish different mini goals to get gems, and then once you have 6 gems, you win the game. But the types of things you can do to get gems is numerous when you have both expansions. And you're moving around a board, and the movement system is very nice. You've got a stack of discs. You're leaving them behind on spaces where you take action. Each place that you can visit in the Istanbul market has kind of a different little mini game associated with it, or mini goals associated with those areas. And then that constant variety just feels super fun to me. So I would say Istanbul popped its way right back up solidly into the A tier. And I think I like it right now better than these other games on A tier. So Istanbul, the comeback. Jaipur, another market-based game set in Asia. This is a 2-player card game. It's got a very clever system of how you exchange your cards for cards with the face-up cards. It's got a lot of this kind of like, if I do something that's going to change the tableau of cards in such a way that it might benefit my opponent. It's got this game of chicken kind of thing, like when do I turn in my cards to collect. They've got these, you like trade in 3 of a kind of a certain type of card, and that lets you collect a bonus chip. But if you can get 4 of a kind, it's even better. If you get 5 of a kind, it's even better. But in general, the earlier you do things, the more points you're going to get. So you're trying to track what your opponent has been collecting from the table to figure out, is it safe for me to wait on this thing? You have a hand limit of 7 cards that also really constrains what you can keep and what you can get rid of. I really admire the design of this game. I don't love playing it, though. I mean, I like playing it, but it's not a game. I really do appreciate the design of this game, but I don't hate it. I don't love it. I would put it on C tier. King of Tokyo is a game that is a Yahtzee-style game where you're rolling dice. The dice are either going to give you victory points, or they're going to let you attack an opponent, or they're going to let you heal up from previous attacks. And it's just really fun, really simple. You're also collecting. Another thing that the dice can allow you to do is get buying power to buy special cards that give you points or let you take certain actions. I don't know if they give you points, actually. They let you take certain types of actions. I'm always happy to play King of Tokyo with up to 6 players. I don't know if that's an expansion or if that is 6 players out of the box. I think it's great. It's simple-minded. It's in the category for me of like Escape Curse of the Temple or Luxor or something like that. It is mentally easy, very fun, mentally easy to play, but not boring. And so I would put it on A tier. Right behind Century. And right ahead of Castles of Mad King Ludwig. Kingsburg is a game that I've only played once. It's got a dice placement system that's pretty cool. It does feel tight. It feels hard for me. You're also like creating buildings and upgrading buildings. I need to play it more. I've only played it once. I liked it, but was also a little confused by it. So I'm going to put it right ahead of Ecos on C tier. But honestly, it could move up with future plays, just like Ecos could. That's my hope for Ecos. Mahjong, we can put this right down in F tier. Totally random, boring, repetitive, attractive game that I much prefer the solitaire version of Mahjong you played on the old Windows computers where you're stacking stuff up or pulling stuff off, I guess. Man, this video is much longer than I thought it would be. Mystery of the Abbey is a clue-style deduction game, but it's one where you're moving around a board, taking certain actions on the board. I wish it was easier to move around the board. I feel like there's just not enough time to take actions. It is deduction game, but at least it's a deduction game where you've got a scoreboard that you're keeping track of. It is a game that you could guess the answer from some dumb luck. So I'm not going to love this game, but I probably liked it better than Gangster City. So I'm going to put it on C tier. It's not bad. Newton is a game I've only played once. I just got it. It's got an interesting minor deck building component to it where you're using tags on the cards that increase the power of various actions that you take. It seemed very abstract, even though it has a theme. Oh boy, nice sneeze. Sorry about that, audience. I think it's by the designers of Marco Polo. It has the look of Marco Polo. It's a very brown game. And I'm hoping, like Marco Polo, that I like it more on succeeding plays than I liked it at the beginning. It's hard to see how you score a lot of points in this game, but that was my feeling with Marco Polo as well. So I'm going to put this right now on B tier, but right at the end of B tier, because I really don't know which direction this game is going to go. I have hopes for it. New York Zoo is another Uwe Rosenberg game in which you are adding different shaped tiles to your zoos. You're putting animals on them. There's a tension about when you activate animals versus when you get more tiles. And it's fine. Like a lot of UA Rosenberg games, I didn't really love it. I'm going to put it on D tier. Notre Dame is a Stefan Feld game. I've only played this once. I really obviously like Castles of Burgundy. I told you that Castles of Burgundy was only my second favorite Feld, and it's on S tier. So obviously, I really like his style of games. My first play of Notre Dame, I think I liked it more than my first play of Newton, but I'm hoping that I end up liking it more. I could see it going in any direction. In fact, I'll just put it right ahead of Newton on B tier. And then last game is Okaya. I've played it twice, back to back. I remember very little about it. You're pulling tiles off. The tile you pull off indicates what your opponent can do on their turn, what tiles they can pull off, and you're trying to get 4 of a kind. So it has a Nanga Parbat kind of thing. I talked about Nanga Parbat in my digital video, where what you do constrains what your opponent can do. I don't like Jaipur. Like I said about Jaipur, same kind of thing. You're trying to do things that are gonna, or Fantasy Realms, not gonna create something for your opportunities for your opponent. Not my style of game, but it wasn't that bad a game. I'm gonna put it on D tier. So that is part 1 of my review of games that I've played in person in 2021. In the next video, I will come back and I will look at the remaining games, and I probably will just keep the tableau up here. So I'm just going to be adding to the tableau the tiers in the next video, fitting these games in where they belong. So hope you'll join me for that one.